Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to another edition of Newsline, coming to you, of course, live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. We've been following the United States election very closely, and this time around it's a closely fought election between President Donald Trump and Democratic candidate Joe Biden. However, although election night was supposed to end on the 3rd of November, and usually you get to know the winner or someone declares victory, this time around the race is so close that even 2 to 3 days afterwards, we still do not know who has secured the seat of President of the United States. Now, why is this important to us, you might ask? The United States is a world power, and how things fare there, of course, directly or indirectly affects the activities here in Sri Lanka. And to discuss the political situation in a global arena as well as here in Sri Lanka, we have with us this evening political analyst Malinda Seneviratne, not a stranger to our station. A very good evening, sir, and welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Malinda, let's start off with the United States election and then move on to matters more close to our hearts here at home. The US election, President Donald Trump has declared victory without any evidence of him actually winning the race or even being in the lead. He's also threatened to go to court. He has actually gone to court in certain states asking for the ballots to be to stop counting, and in states that he's leading in, he has not done so. Could you really unravel this for us a little bit?
Well, it's not first of all, it's not an unprecedented situation, because we saw the same thing happening when George W. Bush became president. It was a Supreme Court decision eventually which declared him as the winner. That was several months after the election day, I believe. And the other thing that you mentioned about US being a superpower and what it does, what happens there has an impact. In a sense, yes, we're talking about this name as opposed to that name or the same name, right? As in the event that Donald Trump wins, the unlikely event that Donald Trump will win, the way things stand right now in the contested in the the key states,
the swing states,
Pennsylvania, Georgia, Alabama, Nevada. In all four, right now, Biden is leading, and so all indications are that he will get. Also, he has got more than 4 million votes
extra on top of Donald Trump.
Yeah, but this is. I mean, there have been 5 occasions when the winner of the popular ballot does not end up becoming president. Right? Donald Trump for one. Right? So that's also not new. But whether that has any impact on Sri Lanka, I don't think so, because US foreign policy has not changed. Whether it has an impact on the world, I don't think so. Because the only danger of Donald Trump is he's
unpredictable.
He's unpredictable. He might press a button, but he did not press a button when push comes to shove. He has gone with what the establishment tells him to do. And to be fair, he has not started any wars. He continued wars that heavy. He continued to fund military bases in 100 military bases all over the world, that kind of thing. But I don't see a Democrat in the White House changing those things, and I don't think the narrative with respect to Sri Lanka is going to change.
Well, let's speak a bit about the resolutions that were brought at the United Nations. Now, we know that under President Donald Trump, they withdrew from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Any changes in this?
They might get back to the Human Rights Council. They can say, well, Trump was a nutcase, we are better, that kind of thing. But, what changes things for Sri Lanka is not who is in the White House, but who is in the president's house in Sri Lanka. Whether it is a Yahapalana type person or whether it's a Rajapaksa type Rajapaksa or some.
Are those the only options that we're left with?
Yeah, that's all. Right now, we look at the last 20 years. What have we had? We had Rajapaksas on one side, and we had alternative candidates on the other side from the UNP, right? Or break away from the UNP, and that's also the UNP. So if it's their friends who are in power, the way they might deal with these things will be different, and the way that we will deal with it will also be different. Right? with a minister like Mangala Samaravira, it is very different from a minister like Dinesh Kumar, right? They have different ideological preferences, and the way they see how the war was conducted, how to engage with the world. So those are the factors that might have but that I don't see changing in the next 4 years. So I don't think the Geneva story will have a different script, even if Biden happens to be the. I mean, we won't have. We will have the same kind. We might have a different ambassador here once this lady's term is done. But I don't see that person saying anything vastly different from what she has.
So this switching between policies, or you said ideological differences with Mangala Samaravira, Dinesh Gunawardena. So every 5 years, every change in regime, we switch our foreign policy. Is this really ideal?
Not ideal, but then what happens if we don't switch? Like, this is supposed to be a democracy. What happens if an idiot sets a policy formula once and for all, and we have some constitutional amendment which says this cannot be changed? We're going to be stuck with that, just like we are stuck with the second Republican Constitution of 1978.
So I believe there's a spectrum here. Having a stable foreign policy, having an unchangeable foreign policy are two different things.
Yes, but the world is not flat, and things are not carved on rock, in stone. And speaking of spectrum, for people who think about Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the Republicans and the Democrats as left and right, the entire political spectrum of the United States, politically, ideologically, as Noam Chomsky said, it's very thin, and it's so far to the right that Biden and the Democrats are left in relation to Donald Trump, but they are both far right. Kamala Harris is not going to change anything. She couldn't even win a single primary. She didn't get a single delegate. So, I mean, spectrums are like that. But overall, I'm not a fan of having everything this way and it cannot be changed, because that doesn't leave any room for debate. I mean, things can go wrong, things can change. We didn't expect COVID-19, that has changed the world, that has changed economic policy. What has that done to the WTO rules? No one is talking about the WTO rules now. So, things evolve, things change, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Things can change for the worse, but that's part of the story.
We've been speaking about foreign policy for the past 3 days, actually, on Newsline. We had Asanga Begunasekara. Then yesterday we had the State Minister of Regional Cooperation, falls under the Ministry of Finance, Taraka Balasuriya, and today we're having you. Yesterday, when I questioned State Minister Taraka Balasuriya regarding Sri Lanka's foreign policy, he said there is a 20-point foreign policy. However, these points were sadly vague. But do you believe that the requirement for flexibility in adjusting a country's foreign policy really justifies the non-existence of one?
No, what we should do is, first of all, before you have a foreign policy, why do we have a foreign policy? It's about how our nation engages with the world. But if we don't have a sense of what our nation is, right, who we are, what our national interest is, then all these things don't make sense. So if we know what we want, then of course we are not the strongest player on the planet, so we have that handicap.
We have to make compromises.
We have to make compromises, but then we have some sense of the ideal. We have some goals, and we work towards them. There's give and take, but we strive. The alternative is we wait for Washington to tell us what to do, and we go and sign. You sign it, Mangala, and you sign it because you trust these people, or they are ideologically on the same page of whatever reason. Or China says do this and we do that. It doesn't have to be United States. It could be China. It could be India, right? So that is not how we should conduct our affairs, locally or globally. I think that's wrong. Better to have some sense of what the nation is, what our national interest is. Across the board, in engagement with other countries, in terms of trade, in terms of what industries we should promote, why aren't we talking about manufacturing? Right? We talk about nationalism and all that, but we are just getting raw materials, putting it together and selling it. Or we are just
extracting our raw materials and shipping it abroad.
Where's the value addition? Why aren't we having, why is the World Bank and IMF and the United States government through its embassy and all the machinations that's part of, why don't they talk about development banks? Why don't they want us to have development banks? That's what the People's Bank was supposed to be, a cooperative bank. Why don't they want us to have development banks? The development banks that we had, the NDB and the DFCC, they were semi-privatized, and they are not looking at development per se. They are looking at profits, corporate sector. And the United States election, I just saw that the stock market is doing well, and representatives are saying, well, now we can hope for a stimulus package and some restricted taxes, right? So that is what this is all about. These politicians, whether it is Donald Trump or Joe Biden, they are Wall Street people, they are Wall Street hacks, right? They might wear. I was speaking to my sister who lives in Pennsylvania, and she just said, Biden is a decent man. He doesn't shoot his mouth. He's had a hard life, but that does not, okay, people can have a hard life and do bad things. But whether or not Biden can really make a change, or if he wants to, that's up in the air, because the Senate is not going to, he's not going to have the Senate. And whether he really has the compassion to make drastic changes. Are the streets going to be owned by the people of the United States, or are they going to be owned by the police of the United States, right? Maybe they won't send the National Guard each time there's a protest under Biden, but maybe the white militias won't be out there, with their guns, and they'll be making a show of themselves. But what is the likelihood of less black people getting killed by the police? I think it won't change, right? So,
So, of course, our viewers out there can send in their questions, if there are any, to the number that will be displayed on your screen. We've actually got one question, and the question is, of course, a precursor to this question is the fact that the United States always champions itself as a protector of human rights, of democracy, and currently, at least from a layman's standpoint, what's happening in the United States with the election, with the questioning of the integrity of the election, be it from anyone, but also being the President of the United States questioning the integrity, there is a bit of a touch of irony there. The question being, can a losing president in the United States, through recourse to legal action in the middle of counting, I beg your pardon, can he find legal recourse in the middle of counting? And what is the image created by doing that?
Well, the United States, when Trump was speaking, the station switched off, right, because he was talking nonsense. But the station should have switched off 4 years ago. If that is the case, why now? Just because it's tilting this way, we don't know. But the United States it's not a democracy. Trump, Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and so on. They were not elected, they were selected. They have a very different system. It's archaic. The United States, I believe, is struggling to become a democracy. Bernie Sanders got kicked out. Why? How? Right? He was the one voice of reason in this whole thing the last 8 years, right? The last 5 years. But he got kicked out, right? Democratically, quote unquote. So let us not have any illusions about how democratic the United States system of elections right? Is. So I don't. But then the image. What is the image that we have of the United States? Just because Donald Trump shoots his mouth Do we think until then we had a nice, the American system was beautiful, and now that he might lose, maybe it might become beautiful all over again. It's pretty ugly what it's doing in the world, what it's doing domestically to those who are not, who fall out of the system, or who are made to fall out of the system, or who are made to stay outside the system, right? So it's not a pretty picture there. So the kind of image that Washington media has generated and maintained over many decades is a lie. So let us not be surprised about Donald Trump. The only difference I see is that he says it as it is. He is a crook, I think. He knows that the system is crooked. He knows who the crooks are. He's using it. And the only difference is he's saying it. Whereas other guys are like big gentlemen about it. But what are they doing? What did Barack Obama, the great liberal and left-wing so-called, he bombed countries. He bombed countries. He killed people in Afghanistan. He started all this stuff in Syria. They have been arming people whom they against governments they don't like. They have been arming governments against people's movements for democracy. They have supported military juntas. They have supported autocrats, tyrants, monarchies. That is the United States of America. Whoever who asked that question, valid question, important question, because the answer hopefully will remove a lot of frills from the notions that we have of the United States of America. I have a friend who says it's USA, it's the United Snakes of America. And he also says UN is not United Nations, it's United Mafia, it's UM. That's a different story.
So also one other question that's been sent in to us by one of our viewers. This is connected to a question that I posed actually at the beginning of the program, statement that I made saying that the result of the election would have an impact on Sri Lanka. The question says, should Biden win, will the Tamil diaspora put pressure on him about human rights issues in Sri Lanka? And of course, in addition to this is the fact that Kamala Harris has an Indian descent from Tamil Nadu. Historically, we know that Tamil Nadu has been one of the areas in the Indian continent, that subcontinent, that pressures Sri Lanka on human rights issues. So is there any connection here? Is there any...
Barack Obama was black.
Right.
What did that do to black people? Chandrika Kumaratunga was a woman, so was Sirimao Bandaranaike. Did the status of women improve? It is not about those. These are systems we have to understand, Charlene, and they are controlled. The institutional arrangement is very strong, and the institutional arrangement is controlled and manipulated by the military-industrial complex. That is
external factors that are not elected.
Yeah, they are not elected. They are not accountable to anyone. They will decide. And Kamala Harris being of Indian descent, I don't know how much of that is important to her. We have to ask her. But I doubt that those kinds of things come into play. The Tamil diaspora will lobby Trump. They will lobby Bernie Sanders. They will lobby you if you were the president. They will lobby Gotabaya Rajapaksa if he was the president of the United States of America, or Basil Rajapaksa, as the case may be. But that does not make a difference to how they operate. They might think, oh, he's a liberal, so. But whether that's going to create elam here, as some people worry about, or some people are happy about. Some others are happy about. I don't think that is how things play out.
But let's talk about the ease of lobbying, or the success of this lobbying that are being carried out on at least human rights issues in Sri Lanka. Would the fact that Kamala Harris is an Indian descent play any role in that? No,
I don't think so. I don't think so. That doesn't mean, Kamala Harris being of Indian descent, will that improve US-Indian relations? US-Indian relations very strong under Donald Trump. They will remain strong under whoever. and I think it would be doing Modi, Prime Minister Modi and the whole Indian system great disservice to say that they can manage relations with the United States better if there's someone who is in the White House who might become president if Biden dies in office, or who is of
is incapable.
I mean, I don't think that countries should think like that or do think like that. And I think that India is a strong country on many counts, and they don't plan out their foreign policy and bilateral relations based on whether or not
someone gets elected
the genetic composition of the person who is in the White House. I don't think is that. I don't think they are as simplistic.
So since you spoke about India, let's speak a little bit about India-Sri Lanka relation. Yesterday, there was a webinar organized on deepening Sri Lanka-India relations. This was attended by Jayanath Columbage, the Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also the Indian High Commissioner in Sri Lanka. And when the Indian High Commissioner in Sri Lanka began his address at this webinar, he said, I was thinking about what I could say at this webinar. Since I was the last speaker, I don't want to repeat what was already said. If I could put it in short, the best way that I see that Sri Lanka and India can deepen their relations right now is by expediting the East Container Terminal project. Now, this project caused a lot of controversy here in Sri Lanka and of course, played its own part in the presidential election and also the general election. The current government in Sri Lanka has made it very, very clear that they are against the sale of national assets. However, again, speaking about, this was even highlighted by State Minister Taraka Balasuriya yesterday. He said that it's there in the 20-point foreign policy, but however, not in detail. It's a very short document.
Right.
So, with India already knowing the fact that Sri Lanka is against the sale of national assets, is it expedient? Is it wise?
I think I don't know the name of the new High Commissioner.
Gopal Baj.
Right. India has an India first foreign policy, right? Sri Lanka
Neighbor first.
Huh?
India's foreign policy is neighbor first.
No, but it's framed by India first.
Okay.
India loves India first.
Okay.
And in relation to the self-love, will love and hate. If that is so required, Pakistan, China, whatever, right? Now, why does India want we have an issue about the Chinese footprint here. We know that. India will twist arms, China twists arms, United States has.
Twist every other organ.
Yeah. Not just the arms, but squeeze stuff also, but that's different. But anyway, Eastern Terminal, they will have 49% control, I think.
The management control, as reported in
right.
In media.
So what can that mean? On the one hand, it could mean they can wreck things here. While they are setting up shop in the Andaman Islands, they can make sure, and this is a worst case scenario, but I don't trust any of these people to do stuff out of love for Sri Lanka. Who loves Sri Lanka? Sri Lankans don't love Sri Lanka, right? You and I do, but anyway, so that is possible where there are a lot of problems already in the port because there's food dragging that is possible. I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on shipping, but that's what I have heard. And if you have a certain amount of control, you can make it work, you can make it not work. Now, we don't know what India's plan is. I mean, for this person to say that the best way to develop relations between you and me is for you to give me something. Now that would indicate to me he loves himself, he doesn't care about me. Right?
But of course, before that, he highlighted the fact that India has agreed to swap agreements with Sri Lanka on the dollar swaps and various other forms of aid.
Give, take. You know, there has to be now, if you are engaging in some trade with someone, you will want profit, you're not going to do it at a loss.
Well, right? There's no free lunch.
There's no free lunch. But you know, if my personal opinion is if India wants to have strong relationships with Sri Lanka, let's do the possible thing. Let's have you know, common patrolling of the maritime boundary, because that is where the smuggling happens. Drugs, turmeric. You know, why did we get the Paliagoda fish market situation? Did it come from Brandix or from Minuangoda, or was it there already? We know for a fact that there's fishing and fishermen engage in a lot of arrests. And Indians have also mentioned this. Indian media has mentioned this. They go, they pretend to be fishing. They are not carrying mobile phones because they can get caught. So they just sit and wait until, pretending to fish, until the Sri Lankan fishermen come and they give the turmeric and they take the gold. It's in gold. It was reported in, I think, the Daily Mirror.
Right.
And quoting the Indian, some Indian agency controlling. So do that kind of thing, then that's a common problem. You are helping us, we are helping ourselves, we are helping you, right? That is real stuff. You know, you can feel tangible things. This can be tangible, but later on, but it can be tangible where they get to feel a lot of things. We have to have nothing to touch. So let's see how that happens, and I hope that the new Indian High Commissioner is listening. Would like to have a conversation with him, but you should get him on the show and ask him these questions. But you know, India, at the same time, we have to understand that India is the most important entity in our overall foreign policy doctrine, or regime that we design, because of the proximity, because not so much about historical relations, we are like big brother, that's all nonsense, but because of proximity. We should not, and I think the foreign minister, I think even president told the Mike Pompeo to a man that India first. India is India. We will not do anything to jeopardize India's security.
India's security, and this was also highlighted in yesterday's webinar by Jayannath Kolambage, the Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Malinda, of course, interesting things to speak about. Unfortunately, time is of the essence, and we have run out of time. Thank you very much, Malinda, for joining us on our show and clarifying these matters on a broad range of issues on foreign policy, which is currently the talk of the town here in Sri Lanka and across the world as well. And thank you, of course, for our viewers out there for tuning in and for sending in your questions. Of course, we will see you again, same time, same place, but on Monday. Until then, take care and God bless.